Hello, everybody. Very nice to see all of you here today. My name is Niklas, and I'm here to talk about why it sometimes might make sense to not support weird characters and put them into your system. And before I start the presentation, I just want to have a quick show of hands. So, if you traveled by plane to get to this conference, please raise your hand. Yeah, a couple, but mostly local. I had to travel by plane as well. And whenever I travel by plane, I usually have to fill in something like this. Yeah, it's probably easy for people to see in the back, but I will zoom in a little bit anyway. First, I'm asked to enter my name as it appears on my passport or in any government-issued photo ID. That's no problem, I can do that. And so I fill in my first name, not a problem at all. Then we come to my last name, and my last name in the passport looks like this. And I think that's a mistake, but that's because I think it should look like this. You see, this little bugger here, this apostrophe, is causing me a lot of trouble. In this case, I got this error message saying that for some reason my last name is not valid. Why? I don't know. Sometimes they are kind enough to tell what kind of characters are valid and which ones aren't. But in this case, I just have to figure it out myself. Now, I've had this problem for over 30 years, so I know that it is apostrophe. And the problem is that, well, how do I fill in my name if I can't really fill in my name? And the answer is that I lie to the airline. I basically say, that apostrophe, that was me just making a mistake. I will remove it and click submit, and that works. And it really works, like border control, passport control, all the kinds of controls, not a problem at all. And by the way, I'm going to talk a lot about the airline industry today. That's just because it's a good example. All kinds of industries have this problem. Recently, I had issues with credit card information. You have to fill in your last name, and there's an apostrophe there as well. Getting things in the mail, problem. I can't really fill in the apostrophe sometimes. And sometimes even hotel book reservations doesn't really work. It doesn't happen all the time, it's not like a daily occurrence. But it happens so frequently that I think 3 years ago or something, I just got a little bit sad. What are we doing? Are we completely incapable of handling special characters? Are we sort of afraid of prepared statements? Are they scary? I don't know. Technically, if you think about it, all the databases that we use, all the backend languages that we use, even JavaScript, they are all capable of handling special characters, and they have basically since their inception. That being said, we haven't really focused about it before, I tried to find a date, roughly in the mid-2000s, we sort of figured out that, okay, it's actually important to support characters that are special. Not everybody is an American. And so my hope is that most of the things that I see is legacy and priorities. Now, it might be that you have changed the database, it might be that you have changed the backend language, or even the front-end framework, but maybe you don't really want to change the validation that you get from your user. And so you don't really, for the business, that kind of makes sense because validation, scary thing, and it doesn't really make money, right? I can still get my airline tickets. I can still get stuff in the mail. And so for the business, it's probably not gonna make any difference. It doesn't increase revenue, it doesn't increase profits. And so, at least my hope is that for some systems, there is a legacy reason, and this is kind of a business problem rather than we suck as developers problem. But there are other kinds of systems, new ones, that don't support apostrophes and other weird characters either. And that was a little bit perplexing when I first saw it. So I looked into it, and I think I sort of figured out why. And to do that, I'm going to have an example here. To do that, we need to think like a billionaire that wants to become a millionaire. So we're going to make an airline. And we decide to make our own system. everything in system A here is gonna be handling all the ticket reservations and whatnot. And that works fine. We can decide whether or not to support apostrophes. Not really difficult to sort of switch it on or off. But we do not cover the entire world. And so we have an alliance with another airline, which I will call Airline B. Airline B will maybe, like, even if we don't have coverage, it will take the last mile, the last step of the flight for a specific customer. But we need to communicate with Airline B. We need to send it a message that, like, we want to reserve a ticket on this flight. And for most companies, for most airlines, they use a system that is called GDS. I'm simplifying a bit here, but like this is sort of like the process. They use GDS, which is a little bit of a weird name. It's called Global Distribution System. Doesn't really tell you that much. Over 40 years old. From what I gather, it's probably a good thing that they use it because it does a lot of validation. The only problem with it for me is that it doesn't support apostrophes. And so if I wanted to buy a ticket on airline A and I had to sort of go through airline B, system A has to remove my apostrophe before it sends it to GDS. And I can think of two sensible ways to handle this. And for me, the most sensible thing, and I guess many in the audience would also think this is the most sensible thing to do, is to remove the apostrophe for the user. So I can type in my information, I can put in the apostrophe, and that will be okay. I will save it. It will be saved in system A. No problem. Or we actually need to save it in the system because sometimes users want to verify that they have put in the correct information. But we need to remove it before we send it to GDS, and we can do that either by sort of like having another table with the sort of like legacy complaint name, or we can just remove it before we send it to GDS, like just replace all apostrophes with nothing. But that doesn't happen. This doesn't happen. Like, this is what happens. Oh, that made a sound. That made a sound. So for some reason, I'm forced to remove the apostrophe. And this is really annoying when I have to type it in. But I do think that this is the most sensible from a UX perspective. And I will try to show like 2 examples of why this is the case. First off, like we have this situation again. And if I type in the apostrophe when I book a ticket for airline A, and I also need to travel through airline B, then this is ultimately the situation in the system. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that there's a problem. Like, as I said, it could be that we have another table with like the legacy compliant name, but I really don't like it. I know we are developers, some of us here, and we create bugs, and not that many people have apostrophes in their last names, so I don't really want to be an edge case in case the flights get canceled or whatnot. If I'm not allowed to insert my apostrophe, then this is the situation, and I feel a little bit more comfortable. We might still have bugs, but at least those bugs will not be related to my name. So that's sort of like the first reason. It seems like a minor reason, but like if you actually sort of think about it, this can be a very sort of problematic thing to experience if you're flying. The other reason is very straightforward. You basically want to check in. And if I'm allowed to put in my apostrophe, and we have the same situation again, I first travel with airline A and then with airline B, and I am allowed to insert the apostrophe, then when I check in, I will put in the last name with the apostrophe, and that is fine, because this is airline A. They know about the apostrophe. What happens on the return trip when I first have to check in with airline B? I can put in the apostrophe, and technically, that can work. But again, legacy and priorities. I'm not entirely sure if airline B is going to handle the apostrophe for me. Like, it can sort of like just remove the apostrophe and search in their database. But they don't have any other customers or any other alliances with airlines that support apostrophes, so why should they bother, right? And even worse, now this is in the hands of another company. You cannot really control this, or you can sort of nudge, but you cannot really actually implement it yourself. And for me, like whenever I travel with plane, I just want to get from A to B. I'm a little bit annoyed that I cannot really type in my apostrophe, but it's not really the end of the. It's not really that bad. And with that in mind, it actually makes sense to sometimes not support weird characters if you sort of have to talk with legacy systems that doesn't support them. But it's really, really important to understand the context of what you're making, right? It matters if your users think the presentation of their names matter, then that has to be sort of accepted. Like for me, airline travel, hotel booking, package delivery, I can do all these kinds of things by just removing the apostrophe, and that works fine. But on my social media platform, I want my apostrophe. I'm not famous enough to have a Wikipedia page, but if I had, I certainly would like to have the apostrophe on there. And for some reason, HelloStavanger is actually pretty good at it, but speaker badges are famously bad at handling apostrophes. I have one here, so I'm happy. But it's really weird. Like, for some reason, conference badges is just bad at this. So back to my previous slide. It is sometimes okay to not support weird characters. It depends on the context, and you have to understand what your users think when you use their system. And if you actually decide to not support weird characters, then please, for me and for everybody else out there with weird characters in their name, do not have error messages that look like this. Nobody really understands what you are actually saying, especially if it's like, please reconsider your last name. That's what I had for you all. Thank you so much for listening, and have a nice lunch.